It's been months since Hyungsoo took her to an event like this. Specifically, a gala. Every time she asked him he would give her the same excuse, "I'll take you next time. You are not ready yet." And maybe he was right. The dress she wore tonight, one he picked for her, she wouldn't have fit into a few months ago. Not with the way he controlled her diet. Now that she blended in a little better with the women here, their perfect bodies wrapped in expensive fabric, their lips painted in confidence. She is at this point got used to it. Her fiancé is gone for a while, and she was beginning to feel the stares. People were asking about him. Where was he? She spotted Leo, his most trusted man, the one who never left his side. If anyone knew where he was, it would be him. "Leo," she called, stepping closer. His posture stiffens slightly before he turns. "Where's Hyungsoo?" He hesitated. It was brief, then his expression smooths over, but she knew him long enough to catch it. "Come with me," he said, avoiding her eyes. A frown formed at her brows. "Why?" "Just come." She followed, heels clicking against the marble floor as they make their way through the crowd. "Where are we going?" "He's upstairs," thought. "Upstairs?" Her brows furrow as she glances around. The second floor is off limits to guests. Everyone knows that. What's so important that he's alone up there? People are asking about him. He doesn't answer. He just keeps walking, his long strides forcing her to follow. Something feels off. A strange knot twists in her stomach as they ascend the grand staircase. Where exactly? He stops. Right in front of a door. She blinked at the door in front of them. "Why are we here?" From inside, she could hear muffled voices through the thick wood. No, not voices really. Whispers turning into breathless cries. Who would be so shameless? There were people just down the hall. Anyone could hear them. People these days have no decency. She shook her head. "Leo, I asked you a question, thought." "He's inside," the words knocking the air out of her. Leo wouldn't meet her eyes, but he didn't have to. She swallowed, but her throat was too dry. Her mind focused too much on the sounds from the other side of the door were clearer now, and her stomach twisted into something nauseating, something awful. Because she knew that voice. She knew it like the back of her hand, like the rhythm of her own breathing. She barely recognized her own voice when she asked, "How do you know it's him?" Leo didn't say a word. A deep rage started to consume her, heavy and suffocating. Her fingers grip around the handle, ready to rip the door open, to throw his betrayal in his face, to ask how could you. But before she could, a strong hand wrapped around her wrist. "There's no point." She snapped her gaze to him. "What do you mean there's no point? My fiancé is in there cheating. You know that too." His voice cut through hers, sharper than she ever heard it. She stilled. He wasn't questioning it. He wasn't surprised. He knew. And that realization, it stung more than it should have. Because if Leo, his most trusted man, knew how long had this been going on? How many people knew? Was she the only fool still holding on to the illusion that Hyungsoo loved her? Her jaw clenched as she swallowed the lump in her throat. Who is the woman? Silence, Leo. He exhaled sharply, looking away. His fingers twitched at his sides. "If he ever finds out I told you, I wouldn't just lose my job, Miss Kong. He would kill me." She closed her eyes, taking a slow breath. "You know I won't tell anyone." Another silence. She opened her eyes and met his hesitant gaze. "You've known me for 6 years. You know I don't tell him things I don't want to. You can trust me." She took a small step closer. "Even more than him." Leo clenched his jaw as he wrestled with the decision. Han Mira. Her hands curled into fists. So, it was really him. She turned on her heels, gripping her dress so tightly she might tear it. Her feet carried her forward before she could think. She needed to get out of here, away from this betrayal, away from the truth that just ripped through her like a blade. She nearly ran down the stairs, vision blurring in her rush. But in her desperation to escape, she wasn't looking where she was going. Her shoulder slammed into someone hard, causing her to lose her balance. She would have fallen if not for the two strong hands grabbed her waist, steadying her back on the stair with ease. Careful there, Miss Kung. What got you so in hurry? That voice. She looked up and instantly wished she hadn't. It was the last person she wanted to see right now. She didn't answer. She didn't have the energy to deal with him. So, she turned and walked past him. She barely made it 2 steps before she heard a quiet tsk, and even without looking back, she could feel his stare burning into her back from the stairs. Something cold pressed against her eyes. She stirred, head heavy, and it felt like it's been hammering. Her lashes fluttered as she slowly opened her eyes. I woke you up, she heard her fiancé voice and nearly rolled her eyes inside her head. Of course, or was the pigeon tracing cold fingers over my face? Instead, she just shook her head. No, he hummed, his fingers brushing against her cheek before moving a stray strand of hair behind her ear. You feeling okay?
Yeah.
Her voice was hoarse. Was something supposed to happen? Nothing. He leaned back slightly, watching her with sharp eyes. You left the gala early last night without informing me. She blinked, momentarily thrown off. Then, the events of last night came crashing back.
Yeah.
I wasn't really feeling well. And you were nowhere to be found, so I left. Hyungsoo sighed through his nose, fingers idly toying with her hair. You know I hate when you leave without informing me. She closed her eyes. Of course, you do. How many times do I have to tell you? I have a reputation to hold on to. I told you just now, I wasn't feeling well. He clicked his tongue, grip slightly tightening in her hair. Whatever the reason is, YN, you are going to inform me first. Okay? She forced her lips to curl into a small smile, something nonchalant, but something easy. Okay. He studied her for a moment longer before sighing. And would you like to explain the havoc you caused in our room? Her body tensed. What? He arched a brow. 2 vases. Broken. I tripped. A lie. She wanted to break everything he owned. You tripped and broke 2 vases? She exhaled sharply. Hyungsoo, can we not do this right now? I'm not really feeling well. His expression twitched, like he was about to argue, but then he sighed, rubbing his temples. Fine. His fingers brushed against her cheek again, deceptively gentle. Rest for a while, okay, baby? I have a meeting. Try not to cause more mess while I'm gone. She didn't respond when he called her baby. She didn't react when he pecked her L1PS. But she felt the disgust all over her body. Anger. It driven men to war. Torn families apart, and left cities in ruins. It was the fuel of the desperate, the heartbeat of the betrayed. People claimed it made you reckless, but YN knew better. Anger made you sharp. It burned through your veins like liquid fire, licking at your bones until you became something else entirely, something colder. That's why she was here, standing in front of a door she never thought she'd willingly walk up to. Jungkook. The very name felt foreign on her tongue, like something from a past she buried. Never in her life had she imagined she'd be standing at his doorstep, in front of the person she despised for most of her childhood. The boy who used to pull at her braids, steal her lunch, and mock her tears. The boy who laughed every time she fell sometimes because he was the one who pushed her. But that boy was gone. And so was the girl who used to cry over his taunts. But still here she was. The only reason she even found this place was because of his secretary. A little bit of pushing, a little bit of manipulation, and she got what she needed. The door opened before she even knocked. Because there were cameras everywhere. He leaned against the doorframe, like he was expecting her all along. Maybe he had. There was no doubt he already knew she was coming. His state of dress, or lack thereof, made it worse, low sweatpants hanging off his hips, revealing the deep cuts of his V-line. His entire upper body was bare, exposing tattoos across his toned arms, his chest, the edge of a tiger peeking from beneath his ribs. The sleeve of black ink on his right arm was something she remembered vaguely from passing news about him. A messy head of black hair, like he just woke up or maybe didn't go to sleep. At all. A silver ring shined between his lips. Without a word he stepped aside, an invitation in his silence. She hesitated. Rethinking the decision one last time, it was only for a second before stepping in. So? He handed her a glass of wine, she barely spared it a glance before raising her hand slightly in refusal. He simply shrugged, not getting offended, and placed the glass on the small table beside her. Walking to the chair opposite of her and sat down. To what pleasure do I owe this visit, Miss Kong? She stiffened at the surname. Of course, he didn't know. Moon. His brows lifted slightly. Dark eyes fixed on her, trying to peel back her layer. Moon Yen, he just nodded, testing the name on his tongue. He didn't ask any question, like it didn't actually matter. So? What do you want? Straight to the point, she could appreciate that. She exhaled slowly, fingers curling against the fabric of her coat. There was no use in dancing around it. I need your help. He leaned back in his chair, spreading his legs, one arm resting on the armrest, the other dragging lazily along his thigh. My help, he repeated lazily. Like this conversation didn't mean much to him. Like he wasn't surprised at all that she come to him. She nodded once. Yes. His gaze didn't move away from hers. His fingers tapped against his thigh, then the corner of his lips lifted into something that wasn't quite a smirk, but close. Interesting. Silence. The air felt tight between them. He was waiting for her to continue, but she didn't speak. Not yet, at least. Because something about the way he looked at her made her skin prickle. Like he was trying to see through her. You still haven't told me what you need. She swallowed. She already come this far. There was no turning back now. I want revenge. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. That he wasn't expecting it. Revenge? He laughed. Not a full laugh. Just a deep amused chuckle, one that rumbled in his chest. Like she just entertained him. Now, that's not a word I didn't expect to hear from you, Miss Moon. She clenched her jaw. Do you want the details or not? Jungkook studied her for a long moment, lips curving slightly. I'll help you. That surprised her, because she thought it would be difficult to convince him. But tell me, Miss Moon. His fingers dragged lazily across the edge of the table, eyes dragging over her face before settling on her own. What will I get in return? She stared at him. You didn't even ask. What am I going to ask for? I don't need to. He said. Consider it done. The only thing matter here is what we got in return. So Miss Moon, what are you willing to give me? She held his gaze, refusing to look away. He was testing her, waiting to see if she would hesitate, if she would second-guess herself. She didn't. Whatever you want, she said flatly. Careful, he tilted his head slightly, he dragged his tongue across his lower lip, teeth catching his silver ring. That's a dangerous thing to offer a man like me. I don't care. She was already here, there was no turning back now. His brows lifted slightly. No. No. What if I say I want something you're not willing to give? She exhaled sharply, gripping the fabric of her coat tighter. I'll decide that when the time comes. Damn, he said under his breath, letting out a deep chuckle, shaking his head slightly. Didn't think I'd ever see the day when you came to me for help. She clenched her jaw. Are you in or not? Did Kong really mess up that bad this time? He drawled, seeing her determined gaze, fingers tracing the rim of his wine glass. She tilted her head slightly, meeting his gaze head-on. Messed up isn't the word I'd use. Jungkook hummed, gaze flickered over her face like he was trying to read between the lines. He always had a knack for that, seeing more than she ever wanted him to. He stood up, taking his time as he walked toward her. She refused to move, even as he stopped way too close until she could smell his expensive cologne, but something like leather, it was addicting. Until his face was one breath away from hers that she has to instinctively place her hand on his broad shoulder. Relax, Moon, he chuckled, I don't bite. He leaned in so close that she could already feel him on her skin. Unless, of course, you ask for it nicely. Her fingers twitched on his shoulder, nails threatening to dig into his skin. God, she hated him. But she needed him. And he knew it too. She swallowed down the bitter taste in her mouth and straightened her spine, letting go of him as he pulled back, giving her space. I need information, she said, before anything else. He exhaled, stepping back fully, hands tucking into the pockets of his sweatpants as he tilted his head at her, considering, my attention is all yours, Moon, he said smoothly. For now. You aren't gonna pick that up? Jungkook's voice came from behind her, barely spared him a glance. No. The phone on the table vibrated again, the name flashing across the screen like an annoying mosquito buzzing in her ear. Kang Hyun.
So?
He walked over, extending a cup toward her. The smell of it was tempting. She took it without hesitation, mumbling a quick, thanks. If she was going not to deal with all this, caffeine was a necessity. He plopped down on the couch across from her, one arm draping over the backrest. Who is it? He asked, nodding toward the still ringing phone. She exhaled, finally tearing her gaze away from her screen. None of your business, John. A small smile formed on his lips, like he was expecting that answer. You know, he took a slow sip of his coffee, I'm helping you. You should be a little more respectful towards me. She scoffed, placing her coffee down and finally meeting his gaze. I don't owe you anything. We made a deal. You help me, you'll get something in return. Other than that, we don't have any kind of relationship that requires me to kiss the ground you walk on. His tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek, and she could tell he was amused. She shifted her focus back to the laptop screen in front of her. Did you do what I told you? She asked, cutting to the point. You need to be more specific, sweetheart. He tapped his fingers lazily against the side of his cup. You asked for a lot. She clenched her jaw at the nickname but ignored it, deciding not to engage. He wasn't going to get a reaction out of her. Not today. Han Mira. She said instead, fingers tapping against the keyboard, as she narrowed her eyes at him. At that, his smirk widened a little. Of course I did. Without breaking eye contact, he reached for the folder on the table and pushed it toward her. Grabbing the file, she flipped it open. Eyes scanned over the neatly organized papers. The first thing she saw was her picture. Oh, she had seen her before. A few times, actually. Always around Hyungsoo's office, always looking too comfortable in his space. The one he said, you don't have to worry about it, babe, she is my friend's daughter, you know no one can take your place. She was younger than her, around 24 years old. She clenched her teeth. Jungkook leaned back against the couch. Recognize her? She nodded stiffly, flipping through the pages. She worked with him. I saw her a few times, but I didn't think, she swallowed. It didn't matter what she thought back then. None of it mattered anymore. Jungkook hummed like he already knew. She came here before, you know. That made her look up. What a . Here, he gestured vaguely, to me. About a year ago. She frowned. Why? She was looking for a deal. For a business investment. Thought I'd be naive enough not to check the background of the person making the proposal. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I found out she was involved with the Kangs. I knew something was off. Because why would she need another investor when the Kangs are one of the wealthiest family? He probably sent her to you. She spoke, possibly, he admitted. Or maybe she came on her own, hoping to secure a backup plan for herself if things went south with him. Either way, I turned the offer down. Were they? She cleared her throat. Do you think they were together a year ago too? Everything's inside the file. He said, and
Yeah.
I saw them together. At one private party. But I didn't care enough to dig at the time. Didn't think. It was any of my business. Of course he didn't. She flipped to the next set of papers, and her stomach twisted. Hotel. Receipts. Multiple. Dates printed clearly on them. Some recent. But. Some were from over 2 years ago. Before they even got engaged. She felt something inside her snap. A slow burning rage that was. Building and building, pressing against her ribcage like fire. 6 years. She wasted 6 years on this man. And the whole time, he had been doing this? She wouldn't ask Jungkook how he got his hand on these receipts. Maybe it wasn't what it looks like, maybe it was just for something, maybe meeting. But Wyan knew these were all excuses she is making for herself. Because. That man left his prints so hard on her. That it was hard to still accept the. Reality. She swallowed the lump in her throat, refusing to let it show, refusing to let any of it spill out in front of Jungkook. So, she stood up. Grabbing the folder. Her laptop and whatever else she scattered around the table, Jungkook watched her with lazy eyes, his cup of coffee still in his hand. Already going?
Yeah.
She adjusts the strap of her bag over her shoulder. Got somewhere. To be. She didn't wait for him to say anything else, already turning on her heel, already making her way toward the door, because if she stayed any longer, she might just fall apart right in front of him. I was waiting for you to visit me, Jungkook said the moment Wyan stepped into his penthouse. This place, it was the only place where she could breathe, the only space where no one could reach her. At least, no one but him. She raised a brow. Really? You don't have anything better to do? He chuckled, leaning against the counter with that lazy smirk of his. You don't know damn well why I was waiting for you, sweetheart. Wanting to take. The next step. You're that eager to destroy him. Well, aren't you? She sucked in a breath. Of course you are, he answered his own question before she could. The man cheated on you with multiple women. Humiliated. You. Of course, you want him destroyed.
Yeah.
A bitter chuckle escaped her lips. I want that. Jungkook's eyes glinted in satisfaction, but I can't say I'm surprised. Cheating? That's just part of the game, isn't it? Like a deck of cards, but switching pieces, discarding the old ones, replacing them when it suits you. Not everyone cheats on their women, Miss Moon, he said, voice quieter. This time, she scoffed, that's rich, coming from you. Jungkook exhaled a short laugh, then suddenly pushed off the counter and stepped closer. Not too close, but close enough that she could feel his presence, the heat of him, the intensity in his dark eyes. If I ever had a woman, he said, voice dropping an octave. I wouldn't. She met his gaze, everyone says that. He tilted his head slightly, watching her. They say it until they get bored. Until the woman at home starts feeling ordinary, and the women outside start looking more desirable. Until the thrill of the chase is gone, and suddenly, the one who waited, who loved, who trusted, is nothing more than a used doll. He took another step closer, just enough to make the air between them tense. Is that what you believe? She held his gaze. Isn't it the truth? Jungkook clicked his tongue. No, he said. It's just the excuse men use when they don't have the strength to stay loyal. Then I guess there aren't many strong men left in the world. Or maybe you just haven't met the right one. There is no space for a right one. She cleared that point. Anyway. So what was it that made you wait for me? He smiled, straight to the work. I love that. He leaned back against the counter again, arms crossed, watching her with something unreadable in his gaze. Then he smirked. I planned out everything, he said smoothly. How we're going to destroy him. And? He tilted his head. I have 2 plans. One where he falls instantly, quick, merciless, no time to recover. His fingers tapped against the counter. Or. His smirk deepened. The other, you know what I mean, right? Something flickered in his gaze. So, tell me, sweetheart. How do you want to ruin him? She closed her eyes, her mind drifted back to everything. Every time he had looked at her with cold, calculating eyes like she was some robot. Every time he made her feel small, unworthy. Every time he whispered sweet nothings while reeking of someone else's perfume. Every time he reminded her that she wasn't enough. Day by day. Piece by piece, she opened her eyes and met his gaze. Until there's nothing left. Jungkook chuckled, his tongue running over his bottom lip, settling over his silver ring. Now that's my kind of fun.